Hi, this is Madeline, and this is my case conceptualization for my client, Helen. So, a bit of demographic background for my client. She's African American, female, 40 years old. She's recently separated, and towards the end of our time together, she was officially divorced by her husband. And she is a devout Christian. She finds a lot of solstice in this part of her identity. The presenting problems for my client. My client states that she was forced out of the home by her husband. She's now moved in with her grandmother until she can find some stable employment. The client reports low mood, struggles with sleep, hygiene, depression, hopelessness, poor concentration, crying spells, and trust issues. She also has a lot of problems with her self-esteem. It's quite low, and a lot of that self-blame based off of her situation. And here's some history relevant to my client's treatment. So she reports having her mother at a mental health facility due to having dementia. She herself does not have any type of mental health history. This is her first time ever getting services for mental health. And besides that, there's no one else in her family that has reported anything related to mental health. These are some of the factors that are going to play in her treatment plan. She was forced out of her home by her husband due to him wanting to suddenly end their 18-year-long marriage. The client now lives with their grandmother. She also found out her husband has been cheating on her and has children of another woman. She's struggling to find employment as she has not worked in 18 years since the start of their marriage. The client reports not really having any adequate coping strategies and has a very small support network. Seems like she only trusts her grandmother right now with kind of everything. Um, she also has a current low economic status due to being unemployed and no longer having the stable income that she was once getting from her husband. Some protective factors is that she is a very active member of her church and has a strong community there. Once again, she finds a lot of solstice and healing attending church and going to activities based in her church. So that's a major thing that she's in that's going to help her with her treatment. Her grandmother is also very supportive of her independence and trying to find a life outside of her husband and her marriage. And here's some brief information about my client's background. Her grandmother does have a criminal background. She has gotten several misdemeanors for trespassing, threats, things like that. Her grandmother, the way she describes her, she's very assertive, very aggressive, and kind of is like a take back kind of person. So they do occasionally butt heads with how she wants to deal with the divorce. My client really wants to move on with her life, doesn't really want to try to get money or anything out of him, where grandma is very much into trying to get revenge and trying to get what she believes that her granddaughter deserves. My client does not have any type of work history within the last 18 years. But she does have a bachelor's degree in business administration, although she has never really used this to seek employment or has gained any employment since graduating college. My client reports having no type of medical history. She has fine health. She is not taking any medication for anything. She doesn't really have any type of medical issues that could affect treatment with me, or affect any of her functioning. So my diagnosis, based off of her circumstance and everything that she's reported to me, is adjustment disorder with depressed mood. This is the criteria that comes straight from the DSM. So she has low mood, tearfulness, which goes along with those crying spells, the significant life changes within the last 3 months. So her sudden change in relationship, getting kicked out the home, the cheating situation, also not living with her grandmother, that has all happened within the last 3 months. She has impaired life functioning, which is from her not being able to eat regularly, not being able to attend her hygiene tasks regularly, and having some insomnia issues of sleeping. Lastly, she has a lot of feelings of hopelessness and self-blame because of her current situation. She holds a lot of that to herself and that she was a core part of her relationship failing. So this is a description of my client's functioning. My client reports moderate to severe impaired functioning. She really struggled with eating and performing those hygiene tasks consistently. She told me she would probably only eat like once a day, if that. She really was not attending to her hygiene regularly, maybe getting to the shower 3 times a week. She struggled a lot with sleep and specifically trying to fall asleep. She had a lot of issues with like overthinking and thinking about everything that's happened to her. And once again, that self-blame and that depressed mood really kept her up at night. My clients state that she also had mood swings and will suddenly become depressed and result in those frequent crying spells. She really felt like her mood was kind of unpredictable. She could be just lost in thought suddenly, unable to concentrate, where that symptom comes along and it comes from those mood swings. My client also has had issues with relationships and has been distant from any relationship that's not her family. So she lost a lot of friendships, really hasn't been able to maintain those friendships she had, just because of all these sudden life changes. So we focused a lot about the bad stuff about my client, but my client does have some really strong strengths of hers. She is very resilient. Despite being through everything she has in such a short period of time, she is very motivated and ready to start taking back her life and accomplishing the goals that we created together. She's very eager to start counseling and to, start discovering this feeling she has and alleviating her pain, all that kind of stuff. She is so focused and excited to be where she is with services. So, some multicultural considerations. My client is of African American descent. This group faces systematic racism that can prevent them from accessing resources and finding employment. Racism can significantly impact an individual's functioning and self-esteem. Based off of this part of my client's cultural identity, practicing skills such as empowerment will be beneficial for her progress and functioning. Um, Before meeting with my client, she already did report low self-esteem based off her situation. But especially when she tries to get back into the workforce, she's going to need a lot of support and empowerment, as she will most likely, unfortunately, face discrimination going to interviews, going to conferences, trying to seek those connections and find jobs in her field. Besides her being African American, my client is also a Christian and deeply enjoys her faith. So, discussing her spiritual practices and trying to implement them during sessions can also help her stay connected to her culture and using her faith in a healing manner. But she already was starting to do that prior, but trying to really focus that on how she can use that to alleviate her symptoms will be the goal. For her African American descent, it's also really important to acknowledge and bring up the elephant in the room, which is my client and I having very different cultural backgrounds. So trying to build that rapport and making sure that's a major focal point each session I'm with her, um, will encourage trust and also will have a more meaningful relationship. And she'll be more available for me to talk about some of those deep things that are upsetting her. Reality therapy especially would be beneficial for my client because it's based off of personal responsibility, the present moment, and action. It's a short-term therapy that complements disorders like adjustment disorders that typically happen in such a short time and usually will alleviate themselves. But when you're doing a short-term therapy with a disorder like adjustment disorder, it helps that person get out of the disorder a lot quicker. Additionally, reality therapy can be highly individualized because it is focused on the client and what the client wants. Meaning that you can definitely structure this to a client's cultural background. So, like my client's African American and Christian background, we can tailor in a way where she's able to accommodate all of the things that come with those cultures. And it's also centralized around empowerment and preparing that client for planning. So this works well with concepts like social justice because you're empowering, you're making that client as independent as they can, and that the client begins to realize that they do have a lot more power in how they navigate the world in their life. So, some ethical considerations. There wasn't anything major in this except for the possibility of counseling notes and treatment plans, things like that, being subpoenaed by the court. Because while I was in sessions together, my client was going through the court process of finalizing her divorce with her husband. So, at the very beginning of the first session, I did talk about like informed consent, what would make me have to break that consent, things like that. But to be completely transparent, I honestly was not aware of her not finalizing her divorce when beginning session. And of course, I did not tell her about how my notes can be subpoenaed by the court. But I would have definitely gone back in time and explained that to her about the possibility of my notes being subpoenaed, um, and things like that. So this is my session two clips. There's two clips that I've pointed out that I want to talk about. So the clip I'm most proud of is from 9:27 to 9:43, and that was when I did a reframe that I thought was super powerful for my client, because she was pretty harsh on herself during this session. A lot of that self-blame and hopelessness was coming out, and I said something along the lines of that she has that bachelor's degree, and although she feels like her husband kind of took everything from her, he's never going to be able to take that bachelor's degree from her. And that in itself is a strength that she comes out of this marriage still educated and still has, something very important to her name. And she took that very well. She got a lot of that positive reinforcement from it and kind of helped her become more open-minded to services and not see everything in such a negative, harsh light. The clip I would like feedback on is from 1617 to 1633. This is how I began implementing my first technique of reality therapy, which is the WDMP system, which is basically a system to help us, create that plan and goals and things like that. I just felt like I had a pretty rocky beginning with it, and I honestly felt like the flow was so disrupted with the way I implemented that, and I would love to hear some feedback about what I could improve on, how I could better implemented the beginning of that system. Session, it made them very productive. I felt like I did a pretty good job of staggering the system because it is pretty intensive. Trying to get through all that in one session, there was just no way. So I felt like focusing on one letter at a time really helped my client understand the concepts, first of all, slowing it down that way. But it also helped the client become more aware every session about how their behaviors um, really dictated their feelings and how it really did, change how they felt about themselves. Also, the ability to create realistic, effective goals to help change behaviors to better suit her needs also was a big thing as well. She was really able to like narrow down exactly where she wanted to see her future, and how she was going to get there. At the very beginning of session two was when we started talking about the system, and she had very broad goals for herself, but over time we were able to really get them specific and narrow them down. A second one was developing life themes. This promoted a lot of introspection and deep thinking, and really brought to awareness what the client wanted with her life. She was with this guy for basically half of her life, and trying to start someone outside of him was a very daunting challenge for her. So, trying to figure out what's her life themes, what does she want from life, where does she want to see her future at. That really helped her, first of all, gain that control and independence that she wanted as one of her goals. And also really helped her figure out what behaviors were blocking her from moving towards her goals. That was something she wasn't aware of too, because although she had a lot of self-blame, she felt very powerless in all the situations she's been in, that she really doesn't have control of her life when she really does. She has a lot more than what she admitted at the beginning. So this is my client's progress to date. So after our final session, session 5, my client reports only having those minor issues or crying spells and mood swings. She also reports that she was able to modify her problematic behaviors, which has resulted in many of her symptoms reducing in frequency. So, a big thing for her was she did start journaling and she enjoyed journaling, but moving that journaling towards later in the day, like right before she goes to bed, that really helped her insomnia because her insomnia wasn't connected to, her staying up at night, overthinking, and really being stuck on the past. So her journaling at night helped her, you know, get wrapped back up into the present moment, enabled her to dump everything out of her mind before she went to bed. She's now able to eat consistently, sleep better, and performing hygiene tasks regularly. She didn't have really any more of those issues towards the end. She also was able to gain some employment. Now, it isn't anything with her degree, but she started working at a diner, and it's really helped boost her confidence getting back into the workforce. The client's not able to begin friendships with other people outside of the family. This was really big for her. She was able to befriend one of the movers actually that helped her move out of her ex-husband's house. Very strange relationship, she admits, but they seem to really get along well. And of course, she's being able to go back into the community at her church. She's more active in choir now. Choir was also a big thing for her at her church, and she's going to practices now, and she's able to, sing with them. And that's something that she kind of left after she, got everything with her husband and was separated from him. This assignment helped me become aware of my strengths and weaknesses as a future mental health professional. It helped me learn about the documentation process, especially because I kind of came into Intro to Practicum and had no idea what documentation really looked like. I do currently work mental health right now. I'm a therapist for functional family therapy, but our notes are very different than what the notes that were given in this class as assignments. Since I practice functional family therapy, our notes are very specific to that theory, which of course is what I'm learning how all the notes are supposed to look like. So I'm happy that I'm not being like led astray by my company I'm currently working for. Um, I do feel a lot more confident and I understand now what documentation looks like. And also just deciphering everything this documentation forms ask. I was pretty like not into what they were asking originally, but this class definitely boosted my confidence with that. Another thing that's more related to counseling skills is silence. I get very uncomfortable with silence during my sessions. It feels like I'm wasting their time and they feel like I'm wasting their time. But I know silence can be such a powerful tool, and I now understand its place in counseling and how it can be useful. About cultural competence, be transparent. It was quite poor during this process. I didn't even consider talking about my client's cultural identity with her during the 5 sessions. I think that's really partly because the sessions were so short. But I was still aware of how her cultural identity did impact things like documentation, treatment, diagnosis, especially. I really made sure that when I was looking through her symptoms that I wasn't, overdiagnosing her, which is what happens to a lot of clients that are culturally diverse, unfortunately, is that they show symptoms so much different than like white people do. So I wanted to be aware of that when I was diagnosing her, of course, and also for her treatment plan in case conceptualization. I wanted to make sure that I was, sticking with her culture and trying to implement that as much as I can, especially with the empowerment thing. Although I never directly said it was related to her culture, I was able to tie that in into how that can help her beyond just the cultural things. And these are just some unanswered questions. So, how has the client's relationship with their grandmother improved? Like I stated beforehand, it is a little bit rocky. Grandmother is very much more like assertive, in your face kind of person. My client's a bit more on the sidelines. Um, so I'm wondering if that has improved, and has my client been able to find employment with her degree? Now, once again, I wish I could go back in time, and before terminating her, I probably would have given her some resources to help her find employment. And these are my references. Thank you so much for listening, and I had a great semester. Bye.